Uh, Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My presentation take a bit long because I had to make a couple of changes. When I discovered this morning that there'll be guys before me that will talk about the topic that I had chosen, so I had to make a couple of changes in my presentation. So yeah, this is the graveyard shift. People are already tired, so I'll try and make it as snappy as possible because I do believe that a lot of the stuff that I wanted to talk about has already been spoken about. So for those that will follow behind me, starting with me, we just have to make it snappy. I'll just tell you a quick story. So this guy gets invited into a conference to deliver a presentation. It was just about around this time, and people were starting to leave. The presentation was a bit lengthy, so people just kept on leaving until there were two guys remaining in the room. One was sitting on the left-hand side of the door, the other one was sitting on the right-hand side of the door. So this guy raises his head and he says, there is two more people. For as long there are people, I'm still going to continue with my presentation. After he concludes, he goes to these guys and he asks them, so guys, what did you find interesting about this presentation? And these guys look at him, they said, no, we are security guards here, we're waiting for you to finish so that we can close. Yeah, so let's get snappy. My name is Mawande Mongo, I'm the Senior Solutions Architect at Altron. So I cover a lot of things in artificial intelligence. I'm an architect, data architect, business intelligence. I'm a statistician by training as well. So today I just wanted to talk about a couple of things, but before I can talk about those things, let me just quickly introduce who we are. So I'm coming from Altron, a division in Altron called Digital Business. Okay, so there's three business verticals in Altron, with one of those being what we call health tech. So health tech does with the switching of the medical records, when you go to the doctor and stuff like that. So we were provided data to the students that were doing the datathon here. So I was, for the better part of the day and yesterday, I was busy helping the students out with the data. But I belong under the data and AI go-to-market, so I'm the sort of like the technical guy there. So what we do here is I'll skip the stuff around the partners and the customers. I'll go back to the business opportunities as well. So we help our customers with the collection of data, just to make sure you collect the data, being structured data or unstructured data that's coming from your relational database management systems, or your data that's coming from your Fed files. So what we're doing is we're trying to make sure that all that data is collected and consolidated. We use some different architectures and technologies to do that. We are very big on data warehousing as well. So we do believe that data warehousing is not obsolete just yet. There's still a need for data warehousing as well, even though there's new technologies that are emerging. And there's also some concepts that are developing around what we call the data lake house and the lake houses as well, So it's more like horses for courses, basically. There are some use cases that you would want to use your data warehouse. There are some instances where you want to use both structured data in the form of reporting as well as your AI initiatives or your AI use cases. Some recommendations would be around your lake houses as well. But once you collect this data, what do you do about it? You try and organize this data. We call this, let me go back again. We call this unified governance and integration, which is the organization of data. If you're looking at that organized here, we talk about data governance. I think having listened to most of the conversations that were taking place here, I think this is very critical in how we collect and share research data as well. How we look at data quality. I'm sure Doc was talking about the quality of data that's not up to standard yet as they are carrying on with their research projects. We're talking about data integration as well. So there will be a lot of data that's collected. Some will be collected in South Africa, and I think researchers work together, and some will be collected outside the borders of the country. So how do you get to integrate that data, come up with mechanisms to integrate that data so that we can use it for the better use of our people? We talked about data quality as well. Is the data complete? Is the data missing? What are the missing values? Is the data usable and stuff like that? So we also look into that as well as part of the data management phase as well. So we talk about data classification as well. How easier would it be for your researchers, to go and look and find classified data, that they can refer to, make sense of, and start using, So the biggest problem now with data science projects as well as research projects is that people spend a lot of time looking for data. And when they find that data is not complete, it's not usable, it's got a lot of missing values. So if we can come up with ways, to make sure that the quality around the data that people use is of good standard, it's easily discoverable, and people can use that data. So that belongs under the organizing part. We call it unified governance and integration. And then lastly, once you organize your data, you build this trusted analytics foundation. The next phase is for you to go and start analyzing that data as well. So that's where all this analysis, your statistical analysis, your AI, your data science and all these things, if they are built on your trusted analytics foundation, then it becomes easier for people to start analyzing that data. So the biggest problem with data that is not governed is the fact that people start creating shadow ITs, so there'll be a data mart here because they don't believe in this data. There'll be another data mart, there'll be another data mart until it becomes a swamp, that's unusable as well. So we're trying to come up with mechanisms and ways, to govern that data so that it becomes part of that trusted analytics foundation, so that you can deliver your trusted data. When you decide to share your data with your fellow researchers, the data that you share is data that can be trusted and is usable. When you go on your data science initiatives, you trust the data that is going to give you the best results. I mean, that old adage that we used in computer science back in the days that said your garbage in is your garbage out, it still applies even to these days. So we need to organize that data to do things like reporting and so on and so on. But at the core of this is the unified governance and integration, the data governance piece. So these are the critical data challenges that are there that we're trying to resolve, to say that, look, we sort of like want to get into a position where we can discover this data. When we talk about discovering the data, you talk about your things like your enterprise catalog. Once you govern your data, you need to publish it into the enterprise catalog and allow people to do what we call shopping for data, basically. So what do we mean by shopping for data? Is a person can go into the enterprise catalog and start searching to say that this is the data that we're currently looking for. It's based on tuberculosis cases, for an example. And then it will say these are all the tables that contain data on tuberculosis data, and this is how they relate to each other. So that's what we mean by talking about discovering this data. I think I spoke about integrating the data as well, because data doesn't always come from the same source. It does at times come from different source systems. So you should have the capabilities to sort of like integrate that data as well, and cleanse that data. That's the data quality that we're talking about. So it's one of the biggest challenges that we still have. I mean, it's been more than 20 years now, but we're still talking about data quality issues. I think it's something that we should have solved a long time ago, but yeah, it's still there. It still forms part of our data discourse up to this day. And then the next thing is, once you've cleansed that data, it's all about securing this data as well. So there's a lot of government regulations that are around data. You've talked about GDPR and you talk about POPIA as well. Then how do we enforce those government regulations? How do you make sure that your personally identifiable information is redacted and is not, you don't give access to everyone, that kind of data. And then you do a master data, so that you can do things, your hyper-personalization, and all those different things. But at the core of this is that you should govern this data. You try to keep track of this data, and you govern that data across different sort of like systems. So these are the critical problems that we have with data that we're trying to solve, So there is a host of different architectural designs, that purport to solve these problems. And at the core of that is what we call a data fabric. So there will be a data fabric architecture, and then there will be a mesh architecture as well. So even this one, I've just chosen data fabric because it's my favorite, but there's other technological and architectural designs, that help you solve this. So it talks to the governance of data, knowing your data, understand its meaning, how it is used, by whom, by which business unit, and what are the policies and rules that govern that data. So you talk about data quality, how do you get to trust your data, because it's usable. There's also something that we call your business term assignment as well. It's not usually only business, but you can do that with your research data as well. So what this happens is that many years ago, we got a call from one of the insurance companies, and they said to us, look, guys, we need you to come here quickly. There's a problem that we're having. It could result in us losing lots of millions, of rent. So we went there, and these guys were telling us that, look, there is a data breach here. We got a data breach. So we'd like to help with us. But we said, no, we are from the data business. We don't do security here. Why don't you go to security? So they explained to us what a data breach is. So can you imagine that we went there once, and there's people that are using that data that have got their own definitions of what this data means. So if we can have a business glossary that tells us that this code means this code means this, so that it means the same things to everyone, and then I think we should be able to carry on, and do our research much more easier, because we don't spend a lot of time, trying to find this data, trying to make sense of this data. It's there, it's clearly defined, everyone understands it the same way. And then we talk about data privacy as well. So when we talk about data privacy, we talk about your protection of your data, access the data that you need, without the risk of your regulatory compliance as well. I think the last part then is your data consumption. Spend less of your time, preparing your data. So can you imagine if you run a business, you employ an accountant, to sort of like balance your books. But this consultant arrives there, the data is everywhere, they have to find this data, they have to cleanse this data. They spend 80% of the time, doing those data mundane tasks, and then they only spend 20% of the data actually, analyzing that data. I mean, you'd feel hard done by, in the sense that you've paid this guy so many millions, yet he's only taken about 20% of this time to do the work that you had employed him to do that for. I think that's how even researchers feel at this stage. To say that, look, as we go through this journey, what we do is we battle to find data that is right and data that is usable. So we spend 80% of our time looking for this data, and 20% of this time only analyzing the data. So if we were to implement these, I think we'll get to a point where we do what we are supposed to do, which is to do research. There is data that's available. If the data is not available, we'll go and source that data, but that data will be in good quality as well. So those are the two things. I think there's a doctor while I was here who said, look, we want to build some proper, robust data management frameworks. So that's what these talk to. Okay, let me run through this quickly. So why are we talking about master data governance? We talk about data source identification, which we're talking about this data discovery that we're talking about. You want to improve your own trust in your data accuracy as well. So only 20% of your data practitioners completely trust their data, which is why they tend to have their own months. There's always a shadow IT, some of people that say that, hey, that data is not trustable. Let's try and create our own, So that always happens. And then you sort of like talking about enabling responsible use of data, Only 33% of your consumers believe that your personal data is being used responsibly. So you must have guardrails around personal data, to try and get technologies that enforce these regulatory compliance things that we talk about. I'm rushing quickly here. So these are the drivers for data governance. I think this is critical. I'm just going to mention a few. I've already spoken about regulatory compliance. I've spoken about common business understanding of terms. I've also spoken about the privacy and the sensitivity of data, but I haven't spoken about what we call your data discovery and lineage as well. So your lineage talks to, as we work on the same data as researchers, because in most instances we've got the same sponsors. How do we track lineage of the data? Where is this data coming from? What are the transformations that were made in the data, and where has this data landed to? What are the transformations that were made into the data, when, by whom as well? That's also very important, so that we can have this lineage. If we work on the same project together and you get hit by the proverbial bus, I should be able to take over and run with the data because there is a clearly defined lineage around your data. That's what we're talking about also when we're talking about governance. And then we talk about data observability. Well, so, as we load this data, as we load the data, we should have KPIs around the data arrival as well. When is the data arrival? At what form should the data be? If the data is not in the form that we want, there is data quality issues, we should be able to flag this data and say, look, there is problems that are there. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about your data observability, okay? And there should be governance and of AI and analytics explainability. That's a topic on its own, yeah. So yes, of course, as we move from your traditional AI into generative AI and agentic AI, there needs to be some governance around that. Even with traditional AI, we should have some guardrails to say that, look, our models are becoming explainable. You can explain why you were refused a loan. Our model should become explainable as well in the sense that we should be able to remove biasness, in our models. So there's a whole lot of things around data and AI ethics and governance as well. So there's master data governance. Since so now, what does this data governance, I think this will be my last slide. What does this data governance sort of like entail? It talks to the data democratization. So your data nerds have moved away from being your data scientist, your data analyst, as well as your researchers as well. So there's a whole lot of people that benefit from the data ecosystem. How then can we make sure that we sort of like govern this data and expose it to these guys to use it as well? You might think that these guys don't know anything, but some of the questions that they have in the data will lead to a lot of research being done. Research should not come from us only. We should open the data ecosystem so that people can also have access into this data as well, over and above the guys that we do. So these are the market tools at a glance that are there, the stuff that will help you with that. There is data cataloging, your data integration and engineering, your API and application integration, data quality observability. I think we've talked about that. There is MDM and 360 sort of like applications, and then there is what we call your data marketplace as well. So what your data marketplace does, there is 3 ways you can do your data marketplace. I think this is very critical. I think I've got left with 1 minute. Critical in our data journey, in the fact that, look, we've got something that we call sharing of data in place. So meaning that your researchers that, for an example, are working on the same project, or if you are from Botswana or you're from Namibia, you want to get data from South Africa and you've got access into the systems in South Africa, there is something that we call your in-place data sharing, where you can sort of like share your data resources, your data products with the other people by sharing your symbolic link. So that symbolic link goes into this guy and says to you, we've shared this data set with you, we think it will be useful to you. They can click into that data set and start using it without really downloading it, and requiring infrastructure to move this thing. So that symbolic link becomes your virtual copies of the data that one can use, okay? That's what I wanted to talk about. And then there's different methods about data sharing methodologies. I was sharing with Stats SA, for an example. That's a discussion that's very core to them. So this is the data governance approach. While as I close, so the problem is, the solution is to discover your source systems. Basically, you try and discover your source systems and your data, and then you find this data, you try and understand this data, you cleanse this data, you create a master data management, you apply some data protection rules around your data, and then that data gets delivered and consumed. I mean, we can talk for 30 minutes on this slide alone, but because of time, I have to go through this. So these are just the data sort of like management mechanisms with reference to what I think it was Dr. Ridwan that was talking about this robust data management solution, and I think we've encountered some issues around data quality as well. So these are just the frameworks and the technologies that sort of like enable us to sort of like go through those. I think I'm going to skip this because I've already made the reference to this already. But these are what results in that are what you call AI embedded solutions, that help you do these things. So there's AI embedded already in these things. So there's automatic enforcement of rules, there's auto curation of data, there's detection of sensitive data, and application of these regulatory frameworks as well. So there are AI embedded solutions that always do that for you on the fly. Okay. So I'll skip this. I think I've come to the end of this presentation. I'm sorry that I had to disappoint you and change the topic for the date, because I did present this earlier on, and when I saw that there are people that were going to present the same thing, then I sort of like tried and changed this, and I hope that it resonates with what some of the delegates were talking about here when it comes to issues of data governance and data quality as well. There must have been a lot of people that have spoken about this. So as we move into fourth IR, I think this is the core of what we need to have in place as we move into 4IR, because we want to govern not only the data that we currently have, but the models as well that will be taking us into the fourth industrial revolution. If we're still there, maybe there is fifth IR now, I don't know. I could be left. So in those words, thank you very much, guys. If there are any questions, then you can ask me. Thank you.
Okay. That's for you. No, thank you very much. This one. Oh.
The laptop.
Oh, yeah. Okay. No, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now we'll move to the next presenter. I could see you had many slides, but yeah, I have to be a fair chair so that people don't say I allowed others for more hours. The next presenter is Dr. Masizana from University of Botswana. So she is going to come to present to us. While she is setting up, I will read